So anyway, welcome to the new sim. This is where we'll be meeting on our Friday session for the next couple of weeks. Can anybody guess why? Why would I decide to res this and invite you all here for the next couple of weeks? Any ideas? I've put a couple of clues out. Yes, well done. Now it's not Valentine, it's Valentine.
No, no clue.
That's Shiny's got it. Valentine's Day. It's February, and if you notice next
It has to do with castles?
No. Romance.
So?
Romance. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about, I don't know, maybe something more historic, some way.
Well,
but anyway, yeah.
We romanticize history. Okay, so we've got a nice verb here, to romanticize. To romanticize. And I can't spell. Yes, with a C.
What is that? How do you say that? A round, a circle with some symbol. What is that, Lynn? It looks like something Germany.
Hey.
behind
the roses. No, they're targets.
Yeah, behind roses.
In days of old, when knights were bold, they used to use target practice. If you notice, there's tents here. So we're surrounded by tents, and then there's the castle on the hill. You're welcome to go and explore later, but honestly, it's more look at it. It's pretty than actually being able to go anywhere. You can wander around and go in, but you won't find any rooms with furniture. It's all mesh, so it's really there as eye candy. But yes, that's for target practice, for archery. Archery?
Okay. Archery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Archery is using... We will be doing some archery. It's so strange. You always seem to be able to read my mind, April. You and Shiny. You noticed the thing that I'm saving for a couple of weeks, but archery practice, bows and arrows basically, Robin Hood and all that. Yeah, not just arrow, you need a bow as well. So what we call bows and arrows. Yeah, we always say bows and arrows.
When I saw the tents, it reminds me of a documentary I watched last week. It is about the celebration of 2,500 years of Iran. Yeah. And in that time was Shah Iran was the empire. Is it empire? You can call it empire. And he built tents for guests. But a little bit more lax than yours. The tent
He's got more money than me. Okay? That's not a fair comparison. Okay.
So this picture reminds me of that celebration. The most expensive party until now.
Okay, well, I'm not surprised, but yes, we're just doing it. This would be how if you were having some kind of... Now, what era do you think we're in? Looking at the tents around you, looking at the way I'm dressed, looking at the castle. Do you know what era you might say we're in?
The Middle Ages?
Yeah, Middle Ages, or... Middle Ages doesn't sound very romantic. So there's a word that is more romantic. Think about Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot. Sometimes it's called medieval, okay? And sometimes it's called the Age of Chivalry. Okay, now, do you know what chivalry means? What does chivalry indicate? Any ideas? We've still got a really distorted voice, Zai. Is there something you can do to change your settings, maybe? I'm not sure. Can you hear us clearly?
Not very clear.
Okay, so if you speak quite slowly, I know it's annoying, but I just heard that quite well, not very clearly. So, April, you just wrote knights, yes. In days of old when knights were bold. Okay, so chivalry was to do with the code that knights were meant to follow, yeah? The code of chivalry. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, Zai. We do have a guide to improving sound quality on the forum. It might be worth just checking your settings. If it's really difficult for you to hear me, what I can do is share with you the stream, and quite often what you can do is mute your mic in world, leave your avatar here, but use the stream maybe on your computer or maybe on another device to actually listen to what we're saying, because the stream is always clearer. The sound quality, for some reason, don't ask me why, I don't understand. I guess because Google's got really big servers. Let me give you the stream. I'll give you the stream link. Hang on.
You can hear right now. Very clear.
Yeah, really difficult to tell what you're saying. So what you can do, let me share the stream with you. Hang on a second. So, this is the stream. Okay, you'll be able to listen. Gosh. You'll be able to listen to the stream, but unfortunately you might have to use text chat because we can't hear what you're trying to say. I know it's frustrating, I'm sorry. But at least you can practice your communication and your listening skills, okay? So let me know if you can hear the stream clearly. There's a little delay, of course, because we're streaming live, but you'll be able to respond to any questions, etc. Okay? Okay, so the age of chivalry, and it's a whole genre of romance and what they call chivalric romance. Now, to me, it's slightly ridiculous because really, I mean, they used to cut each other up. There was torture, there was murder, there was wars, but somehow we have this idea that it was romantic. Okay, you'll just have to take my word for it. And in literature, they talk about the medieval epic, medieval romance, the medieval epic. And the French were actually responsible. Okay, the French really tried to make La Mort d'Arthur, the death of Arthur. And they really did romanticize it. Okay, and a lot of it was all about magic and daring do, fairies. Shakespeare covered it. Excellent, good side. It's another reason we stream. If you have voice problems, you will be able to hear us much more clearly. Okay. So I thought we could just read a little bit about the folklore and courtly love. Okay, just take a little bit of reading each. Okay.
But I'm now watching the last Kingdom, Lynn.
Oh yes.
And it is also I thought it is in a medieval period, but it is not at
Romantic.
all romance.
No.
It is terrible. Oh,
It's so violent. Wait till you get to Vikings. Yes, I mean, they would not have made... It's interesting because they would have never made The Last Kingdom a few years ago, a decade ago even. But somehow people have got sick of this rose-tinted glass and history. And I think Game of Thrones has a lot to do with it. No, honestly.
I was about to write the same thing, it reminds me Game of Thrones.
Yeah. But I think that, the film industry led the way, and then television's had to follow, because it's one of the reasons, by the way, I've been writing. It's so embarrassing about, what's that? The TV program that Mohit's been writing about. What's it called? The one, Mind Your Language. It's so embarrassing. I mean, it's terrible. It's the most racist bit of drivel ever written. But it can be funny. But when you watch it now, in the light of being in the 21st century, you're like, oh my God, the stereotypes in this are so terrible. But Mohit loves it, so what the heck? I'm like, oh no, we've changed. We're not like that anymore. And then you watch The Khans, which is currently on television. You think, actually, the people who make television programmes really do still think like that. It's weird. Anyhow, let's start by reading. And Shiny, you were the first. You were the first person in world. Okay. So, Shiny, if you'd like to start reading. Hello, Traum.
The earliest medieval romances dealt heavily with themes from folklore, which diminished over time, though remaining a presence. Many early tales had the knight, such as Sir Laufar, meet with fairy ladies and Huang of Bordeaux is aided by King Oberon, but these fairy characters were transformed more and more often into wizards and enchantresses. Morgan Le Fay never loses her name, but in the she studies magic rather than being inherently magical. Similarly, knights lose magical abilities. Still, fairies never completely vanished from the tradition. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a late tale, but the Green Knight himself is an otherworldly being.
Very good. So what we're doing here is we're looking at... Oh, let me give you a seat, Hermina. I'll move this one over to... Bear with me. Puff. 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 Hang on. Come to you in a moment, Shiny. I hope we're not going... We're probably going to get a tangle of legs in a moment, but never mind. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Oh, and thank you for not sitting next to my chocolates. That's very chivalric of you. Okay, so the really early medieval romances, they were full of fairies and mythical creatures, unicorns, etc. And that slowly disappeared. But the knights and the knights errant and the knight's quest, that never disappeared from this sort of literature. And maidens fell in love with knights always, and they were always chivalric. You know, there was no rape or murder. Oh no. I'm sure that it was terrible at the time, but the literature doesn't reflect historic fact. It's okay, Traum. Take your time. Get used to the new sim. Okay. We're talking about romance And why I've resed this particular sim is because in medieval times, romance, and we still romanticize it. Now, a couple of little French bits for you, Shiny. Are you in an English lesson or a French lesson? Okay, the first one, good English word, presence. Not presents, presence. Try it.
Presence.
Yeah, not presence. Present and correct,
Present.
sir. Yeah, to be present. Okay.
Presence.
Yeah. Present versus to give a present, to be present, and to have presence. If you have presence, what's the guy's name who was in Apple? Steve Jobs. He had real stage presence. Yeah, people noticed him when he was speaking, and he had good stage presence. Okay. So the next one is a French word, but it's very important because of it's one of the major wine growing regions of France. Bordeaux. Try it.
Bordeaux.
Yay! Good. And this book, believe it or not, this is what we actually call it in English as well. Le Mort d'Arthur, or Le Mort d'Arthur.
The more that
Yep, translated it means the death of Arthur. And Arthur, does everybody know who they're talking about? When they're talking about Arthur, Morgan Le Fay, the Green Knight, Sir Gawain. Any ideas?
King Arthur?
King Arthur, yes. And who's Gawain? Got King Arthur? Who's Gawain?
That's Guinevere, I think, no?
No, he's one of his knights. The Knights of the Round Table. Okay. So we've got King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, mainly responsible for this romanticism of medieval times, and this idea of a code of honour for knights, and that knights should behave in a chivalric way, even when they're bashing each other's brains out on the field. This idea of chivalry should come into play. Merlin, yes, well done, Simons. Yeah, Merlin, Merlin, Lancelot, King Arthur, and Morgan Le Fay. Any idea who Morgan Le Fay was?
Isn't she the sister of Merlin? She's a bad one, eh?
Yeah, well, there's some differences. Okay, so some people say she was Merlin's sister, and some people say she was Arthur's sister. Okay, sometimes known as Morgane. Okay, lots of different names for her. She's been played many different times. Okay. She became Merlin's apprentice, though. Okay.
Sorry, what does it mean, King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table? The Round Table. What's the meaning of this, please?
Okay, good question. Now, I probably get lynched if I'm back in England and I say this anywhere around Cornwall, but there's no proof that King Arthur ever existed. Okay, however, legend has it he united the Kingdom of England, which had before him had been just little fiefdoms with lots of warlords running them. So he united England against all invaders, basically. And legend has it that he built Camelot, Nobody's really sure where Camelot was. Some people say Tintagel, but there's a guy who says it's up north now, and he's trying to prove it. It's really funny. Some people say it was in France, by the way. The French often say Arthur was a Frenchman, as only the French can. Anyhow, and certainly they made him famous. But anyhow, the Knights of the Round Table, when Arthur became king, instead of sitting at the head of a big long table, as kings were wont to do in those days, he had a round table built so everybody would be equal, okay? So that nobody would sit at the head of the table as the big boss kind of thing, okay? And so whenever anybody talks about Arthur, his knights are known as the Knights of the Round Table. Okay, Tram?
What is the name of his weapon again, Lynn?
That was Excalibur.
Yeah, Excalibur.
Yeah, Excalibur, the famous sword Excalibur. Okay, with a capital E, because in those days, again, this romantic notion again, they named their swords, and the swords were said to have magical properties quite often. They would go for, I mean, a sword in those days could be the difference between life and death. So Excalibur was probably a very well-made sword. And of course, most people know this story through Disney. The Sword in the Stone. I don't know if you've seen the film. Let me know if you have. The Sword in the Stone.
Yeah.
You sound really overwhelmed there. Yeah.
It's done. I mean, yeah. No, anyway. Hard to explain, but yeah.
I don't mean to bring up any bad memories. Traum, you've got kids. Have you seen The Sword in the Stone, the film, the cartoon?
No, not that I can remember.
Interesting. How have you escaped that as a mum? I must have seen it
I
about 20
don't know.
times.
Maybe I know the plot, then I could say more, but the headline doesn't say anything to me.
The title, not the headline.
The title, yes.
Yeah.
Not the headline.
It was headlines when it came out, but it's a very, very romanticised, simplified version of a very complex story. I actually would, if you're interested in it and you like good literature, The Once and Future King is very good. Okay, that's what they basically based, I think they based The Sword in the Stone on. And if you get a chance to read The Once and Future King, I might add it to our little list of books to read. Actually, I'm not sure if it's possible, if it's actually been released from. I'm not sure if it's been released from copyright, so it would really depend on that. Let's have a look. Gutenberg's always a good place to go. Project Gutenberg. There you go. 1958. Would that be out of copyright already? Doesn't seem to have the full text, so I think it's still under copyright. But anyhow, if you can get a copy of it, it's not that expensive to buy if you just buy a paperback version. Then it's a really good read. I've read it several times. And if I'm still alive when it comes out of copyright, we can read it together. Okay? Better than The Sword in the Stone, I'll be honest. Okay, so let's get back onto the folklore and folk tales of this chivalric era, this time of chivalry. Bear with me. April, I think you were the next person. Oh no, Monique, you were the next person to join us. Monique, mustn't forget you. Okay, so Monique, here's your text.
Yes, hold on. Okay, early persecuted heroines Early persecuted heroines were often driven from their husbands' homes by the persecutions of their mothers-in-law, whose motives are seldom delineated, and whose accusations are of the heroines, having borne monstrous children, committed infanticide, or practiced witchcraft, all of which appear in such fairy tales as The Girl Without Hands and many others. As the time progressed, a new persecutor appeared, a courtier who was rejected by the woman of whose ambition requires her removal, and who accuses her of adultery or high treason, motives to duplicated in fairy tales. While he never eliminates the mother-in-law, many romances such as Valentine and Orson have later variants that change from the mother-in-law to the courtier, whereas a more recent version never goes back.
Okay, so yes, this idea of treachery. So you've got chivalry on the one hand, yeah, and then on the other hand, treachery, being betrayed. Okay. Now, just the one word. You corrected yourself very well there. So just the one word, and that's adultery. And to be accused of adultery in those days was basically a death sentence. So pretty serious accusation. So try it, adultery. Not try adultery, just the word. Adultery,
okay.
That's it. Now I know we say I know we say adult. Okay, so it's not adultery, it's a different pronunciation. We've got adult as in grown up, but adultery as in to betray the person you're married to. That's it. And you get 2 smileys for these 2 words. Heroines. Not to be confused, of course, with heroine. That's not heroic. Okay, heroines and witchcraft. Try them both.
Okay. Heroines and witchcraft.
That's it. Good, good. Yeah, witchcraft is fine. I say witchcraft because I'm posh. Okay. Witchcraft is okay too. And it's, again, this idea of the heroine. Does everybody understand what it means by heroine? What do you have to do to be a heroine?
A lot of things, you know.
Really?
It's something, yeah, I mean, you should be a really important and but valuable person to be considered as a heroine.
Nowadays, yes. Back then, not so much, and not in the literature. So if we think about fairy tale heroines, what do fairy tale heroines tend to do?
They remove type spells.
They generally fall under spells, actually. If you think about Sleeping Beauty, put to sleep by a wicked witch. If you think about Snow White, has to go in hiding with little men in the woods because of a witch. Swallows a piece of a poisoned apple. Then she becomes the heroine through one particular act, and then Sleeping Beauty falls asleep when she pricks her finger on a needle. Something happens that makes her the heroine of the story. Any ideas? What happens to these heroines? They get rescued.
Get burned?
No, they get rescued. By princes.
Mm.
Back in those days, to be a heroine, you had to basically get into trouble and get rescued. We're talking about the age of chivalry. And we just sort of like, help me, help me. A big prince comes along, I'll save you. Oh, my prince. And they lived happily ever after. Okay? Yeah, the hero's girlfriend is the heroine. I'm afraid you're quite right, Simos. They didn't do much back then, really. Guinevere, the heroine of Le Morte d'Arthur, she was an adulteress at the end of the day. Morgan Le Fay, she was a witch. Basically, women weren't very well portrayed, to be honest. Lady of Shalott killed herself. I mean, It's all a bit depressing as a woman. As a young girl, I had to grow up with this stuff, so it's a wonder that I'm as liberated as I am. But these are recurring themes. Yeah, Romeo. Now, we don't say Romeo and Julia, by the way, in English. Does anybody know what it's called in English?
Romeo and Juliet.
Julius?
Yes, Juliet,
and-
not Julius, no. That would be an alternative version of the story. I think that'd be quite interesting. But Romeo and Juliet, okay? Julia is, I think, the French word for her, Romeo and Julia. Okay, so, and these across Europe, and I think I've never studied literature in depth, but you will find these kinds of stories occurring most round the world. Different characters, different names, different backgrounds, but generally, yes. It's strange, but the most alluring heroine I was ever introduced to as a child, who was a strong character, was actually in 1001 Nights, the tales told by Scheherazade, etc. So my main heroine, I thought, okay, we don't have to wait around for men to rescue us, we can rescue ourselves, was actually from the Middle East. Okay, any questions so far? I'll give a couple of moments for Zymos to ask a question too.
Lind, in English, is there a title of, it is so difficult to explain. So, me and my husband, for example, I have a mother and he has also a mother. And I call his mother my mother-in-law, and
Yes.
also he calls my mother his mother-in-law. But what does my mother have to call his mother? Is it just so if I have to?
They're just related by marriage. Then they don't really. They don't
There's no title.
Yeah, no. There's no direct connection. There's no special name, as far as I can think. And you just have to pray they get on. That's the most important thing.
So if I have to present her, I will say this is the mother-in-law of my daughter. My daughter's mother-in-law.
Okay. If your son gets married, okay, then you would introduce his mother-in-law, because you'd be her mother-in-law, so you'd introduce his mother-in-law as, this is my son's mother-in-law, okay?
So like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah, even in French, there is no title for that.
Well, it's because it's
annoying.
just by marriage. Yeah, we often have this word by marriage, which means not a blood relation. Remember when we were doing families? There's a tenuous link, but it's not really. It's just an accidental link, if you like, and it's your offspring that and the actual people who are married together that develop the link between the families, the stronger link, which then goes into the blood relations, grannies and that can be a nightmare in itself. Who's going to be called granny? Who's going to be called nana or grandma or? And nowadays, nobody wants to be called granny. It's terrible. Nobody. They do in Chinese, yes? What do they call? What does your mother-in-law call his mother-in-law or her mother-in-law? Shiny, take the mic.
I can say it, but will you understand?
Probably not, but it'll be nice to hear. Go on, just say it.
Go on.
They have different. The daughter will call. the mother of the daughter will call the son of the mother 丈母娘, and in opposite will be 亲家母.
There you go. That's much more civilized because people then know the relationship.
Yeah, they have different specific names of every relative. You know, your father's brothers will have different name to call them, and your mother, the brothers or the sisters, they have another names for them.
That's really interesting. I guess, you know, a sociologist could look at it and, you know, just see that maybe that family connection has much more importance in China than it does in Europe. Because I can't think of, I mean, I don't know enough about the Romance languages to say. We maybe could ask Zom, is there a Spanish? I could imagine, because in Spain, family is really important. So maybe also in Spain, they have special names for them. But no, in English,
But
not.
Monique is here.
Oh, Monique!
She's Spanish speaking.
Again? Are you ignoring me again? Oh my gosh. I love you guys.
You're a Spanish speaker. So in your country, do you have
I'm
a
from
special
somewhere.
name?
For what? Sorry?
Oh, okay. Do you have a special name to show the relationship between the mothers-in-law?
Oh, actually, mother-in-law's suegra. And I would say, like, I want you to introduce my suegra. That's all, but not like they don't have a specific name,
For
you know,
each other.
just to.
Okay.
Huh?
Wait, it's more the
Yep.
name for each other. So suegra, and would that be the same for your husband when he meets your mother?
I mean, if it's my father-in-law, what do you mean? Or what?
No, your okay. So your husband's mother is your suegra, yeah?
Exactly.
And
She's my suegra.
what is your mother to your husband? Is that also his suegra?
Exactly.
Oh, okay,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yep.
And
Both are suegras.
his suegra to your suegra, do they have a special word for each other?
No,
No, it's
they're
just Mrs.
just
So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so,
relatives,
yeah.
just because they have to. I don't know. No, just my mother would say something like, "Yeah, I want to talk with your mother-in-law," you know,
Yeah.
or "I would love to talk," but not like no. But there is no name for that.
Okay. Now that's interesting because I didn't think, as I say, I've never come across it before. I love the fact there is in Chinese, but there doesn't seem to be in, I know there isn't in German as well. It's Schwiegermutter and Schwiegervater, and it's the same both sides. And I've never heard anybody saying the Schwiegermutter or the Mutter-Schwiegermutter or something. Interesting. Thank you, April, for pointing out my stupidity. Oh, what a shame Zom's not here. That famous Spanish speaker, she'd kill herself laughing. Okay. Oh, I'm blushing. So, April, it's your turn now to read, okay?
Okay.
Here's your text.
In Italy, there is the story called Il Bel Gherardino. It is the most ancient prototype of an Italian singing fairy tale by an anonymous Tuscan author. It tells the story of a young Italian knight, depleted for its magnanimity, who gets the love of a fairy. When he loses this love, because he does not comply with his conditions, Gherardino reconquers his lady after a series of labors, including the prison where he is rescued by another woman and a tournament where he wins. Other examples of Italian Tuscan poetry tales are Antonio Pucci's literature, Gismerante, Il Bruto di Bretagna or Brito di Bretagna, The Ugly Knight of Britain, and Madonna Leonessa, Lioness Lady. Another work of a second anonymous Italian author that is worth mentioning is Storia di tre Giovanni disperati e di tre fate, story of three desperate boys and three fairies. Oh, it sounds nice.
Well done. Your Italian is brilliant. Now, aren't you all glad that you didn't get that text? Okay, so there's all these stories, as I say, across Europe, Italy, France, the UK, and they all have this thread of romance through them. Okay, and I really can't give you any corrections there, April, because it was perfect. I was enchanted with your Italian pronunciation as well. I'm going to try and see if I can get the story of the three desperate boys and three fairies. I've never read that one. I've read most of these, but I've never heard of that one, so I'm going to give it a go as well. Any questions, apart from about the Italian pronunciation?
I would like to know when you hear desperate boys, on what are you thinking? On a hopeful or the opposite?
Sorry, when I hear desperate boys.
Yes.
Okay.
I am not sure. I'm not sure. I think when I see desperate boys.
Okay, I would envisage them in the way that I just read it, that they're in danger, or that they want something very, very much. You know, if you are desperate, it could mean that you are in danger, you need to escape from something, but it could also mean it can be as it can be as sort of every day as, oh, I'm desperate for a wee, or something like, desperate for the toilet. But I don't think that's what they're talking about. I think it's just they want something they're in a bad situation. That's how I read that particular title. But I've not read the story, so I don't know. Maybe it's just that they're desperate for the loo.
Okay, thanks. I always have big problems when I hear desperate, because I do not know on what I should think.
Yeah, don't say
Housewives.
desperate. Yeah, desperate housewives. Well, they were desperate for something else. They were bored. They were desperate for romance and excitement in their lives. But it's not desperate. Remember that ATE ending has often got the ut saying. Yeah, the ut ending. Desperate. Okay? Desperate.
Desperate.
Yeah, that's better. Yes, desperate housewives. Good, a good example of desperation. Different kinds of desperation. So desperate, but desperation. No, you wouldn't say are this stories. Do these stories take place in the Spartan era? I think Sparta was before these stories, okay? You mean Spartacus, etc. Gods of the arena, blood and sand. So Spartacus himself, which is what I always think of, who I always think of when I think of Sparta, died in 71 BC, so quite a lot before this particular period. Okay. And if you want medieval times, I'm trying to get you the middle, which is, as Monique quite rightly pointed out, the Middle Ages, medieval times. It spreads quite a bit, okay, and that was from the 5th to the 15th century, okay. Okay, Simons? Oh, of course you won't see that, and you won't hear it until a few seconds have passed, because there is It's not lag, it's a delay. It's a timed delay, deliberate by YouTube. Okay, good. Excellent.
I have a question, Lynn.
Go on, April.
Because this word magnanimitas reminds me of what is the name?
Magnanimous.
What do we call Napoleon? The Napoleon, he had that what do you call it? Because he is so little, so small.
Oh,
so
that's
short.
not true. That was just propaganda put about by the British. They do say that Napoleon wasn't actually much smaller than anybody of those times. People were smaller back then. It was actually something put around by the British. But I'm not sure what you're trying to say about him.
the illness, a sort of illness, mentally illness that he wants to be the best, and
megalomaniac.
He wanted to be the best. Is that megalomaniac? Yeah. Ah, okay.
No, that word actually, I thought you were going to say it sounds like magnanimous, and if somebody is magnanimous, being magnanimous in defeat, for example, it means they show a lot of generosity. You know, if I were to be magnanimous, I would say to you all, please help yourself to one of my chocolates. But I'm not going to. I'm not magnanimous. I'm mean and greedy. Okay, but megalomaniac, that's somebody who wants to rule the world. Yeah, and yes, he was a megalomaniac, as far as I know. I mean, I never met him. I'm not that old. But this desire for power is megalomania. Okay.
Okay, so it's actually a little more the opposite than the similarity. Magnanimous and megalomania.
Yeah, and we've got magnamitas. We need Eleanor today, don't we?
Isn't it Italian?
It's Italian, so it's from the Latin. Yeah, so she's
Yeah.
studied Latin. If you've studied Latin, then a lot of Italian language falls into place. Okay. Magnanimitas. Magnanimitas. I wonder what that... It might even have some kind of magnanimitas meaning... No, magnanimity is what it comes off. But in the Latin dictionary, it is about generosity and high-mindedness and... yeah. So it's obviously from that as its root. Okay? Okay, so let's see. That was April. Now, Zymos, do you want to try saying something and see if you've got a clearer voice now?
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Yeah,
Do you
okay,
guys
let's
hear
try
me?
it, shall we? Let's try it in little bits, okay? Uh-huh. Okay, let me give you a little bit of text and we'll cross our fingers.
Do my voice really clearly?
Sounds much clearer, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so here's your text.
And later romances, particularly those of French origin, there is a marked tendency to emphasize themes of godly love, such as faithfulness in adversity, from c. 1760, usually cited as 1764, at the publication of Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. The connotations of romance move from fantastic and eerie, somewhat gothic and generative of novelists like Radcliffe's A Sicilian Romance, 1790. The novella centered on the episodic development of courtship that ends in marriage.
Very good, well done. Hey, we heard you. Fantastic. Sometimes it is just a case of waiting for your connection to settle down. So that's why having the stream to listen to for a while really helps. So that's great. Well done. Okay, just a couple of words for you first. We'll look at these and then I'll let you read a little bit more. The first word is particularly. Particularly.
Particularly.
Yeah. Okay, you need to practice that one. I know. It's something about adverbs. Yeah, there's something about adverbs. That "ly" on the end of a longer word, it just throws you all completely. It's so odd. But particularly. So to be particular or in particular, and then you just add the "ly" at the end. Particularly. Okay.
Particularly.
Perfect. Yay. Well done. And then one of my favourite words, connotations. I love the word connotations.
What it mean actually?
It means when you hear a word, it invokes a feeling or an idea. Okay? And connotation is really important when you're reading literature. What's the author trying to tell you without actually telling you? What's the connotation behind the words? So, connotations. Try it.
Connotations.
Yeah, good. Because different words can have different connotations to people. One person would hear the word cat and think, oh, lovely, kitty, kitty. Somebody else hears cat and thinks, stinky, horrible beast. Dog, the same. You know, some people think, oh, dog, yes. Faithful, companion. Other people hear the word dog and think, oh, dog poo. The word has different connotations for different people. Okay? So that's why it's a very powerful word in English, connotations. Okay, so let me give you the second part of your... Oh, did we cover all the words? Oh, yes. No, the other word, it's not mariage or marriage, it's marriage. It's a funny one, I know. It's just marriage.
Marriage.
Yeah, literally as if that A is not there at all. So the A is silent. It's just ich at the end. Marriage. Okay.
Marriage.
Perfect. Well done.
Marriage.
Marriage. Yeah. Okay, and the next part of your bit of reading. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're okay.
What is the beginning of the sentence? It's just the letter I that's missing in the beginning.
Oh,
Totally in the beginning.
that's me cut and paste, I'm afraid, yeah. So
Yeah.
it should be in later romances. Yeah. As you know, sometimes when I'm cutting and pasting, it goes a bit wrong. Okay. So, Shiny, if you'd like to read the next bit. Oh, sorry, not Shiny, Traum. Traum. Sorry.
Ja, thank
You'd
you.
like to read the next bit? Sorry, Shiny.
Yeah. Okay. With a female protagonist during the rise of romanticism, the depiction of the course of such a courtship within contemporary conventions of realism. The female equivalent of the novel of education informs much romantic fiction. In Gothic novels such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, the elements of romantic seduction and desire were mingled with fear and dread. Nathaniel Hawthorne used the term to distinguish his works as romances rather than novels, and literally criticism of the 19th century often accepted the contrast between the romance and the novel in such works as H.G. Wells' scientific romances in the beginning of science fiction.
Very good, well done. So it's spread across a vast era of fiction, this idea, this romantic idea that really began in the Middle Ages, in medieval times, this idea of chivalric romance. It's kind of caught women in a kind of trap as well. We're breaking out of it in the UK. A lot more books aimed at girls have the girls rescuing themselves nowadays, by the way. You've only got to read Roald Dahl's Revolting Tales to see how times have changed. But it's going to take a long time before we escape the clutches of the idea somebody's going to come and rescue us. Nobody's going to come and rescue us. Okay, let's have a look at your corrections, Traum. The first one, contemporary. Contemporary.
Contemporary.
Yeah, not orary. Contemporary. Yeah. Airy.
Contemporary.
It's contemporary. It's all us, I'm afraid. Contemporary. Try it.
Contemporary.
Yay. That's better. You're getting there.
Contemporary.
Okay, that'll do. As long as you don't do airy. Contemporary, contemporary. I can't say it the way you do. Contemporary is wrong, but contemporary is okay. But if you look at the actual phonetics there, it's contemporary. Okay. And do you know what time if we're talking about something contemporary, what time are we talking about? History, future, science fiction?
The dark times.
Okay, not quite. Something, what?
Medieval?
Past, present or future? Contemporary. Any ideas, anyone?
Past.
Present. Sorry, Traum. But if you see a contemporary art exhibition, you're looking at art probably from artists who are still living. If you read contemporary literature, it won't be out of copyright because it means literature set in the present, okay? It's now, exactly. Okay, Traum?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so we're in a virtual world which is very contemporary, but quite often you'll find yourself transported back into the past or way into the future in virtual worlds. Very few want to actually be in the now. What's the point of being in a virtual world and making it look like it does now? Okay, so occurring in the present, contemporary. Then the next word I'd like us to look at is seduction. Seduction.
Seduction.
Yes, seduction. The act of seducing someone, to seduce. Now, of course, Valentine's Day is all about romance and seduction. Okay? So, what does it mean to seduce someone?
To get someone down.
I think I prefer April's to attract someone, to convince them to do something they probably wouldn't. Trump seduced the American populace. Don't know how, but he seems to have managed to do it. It's often got this sexual connotation as well. Seduction is often the idea of someone convincing somebody to have a romance with them when they probably wouldn't have done so. But it can also mean just to attract someone. There is an element of seduction in eloping, but mostly eloping is both parties wanting to escape control, maybe of parents or authority figures. We should maybe talk about that next week because, yes, eloping's very romantic. We've got a special place in the UK where young couples used to elope in the past. And they used to elope there and get married by a blacksmith. How romantic! I could seduce you with the chocolates if I was so minded, but I prefer just to keep the chocolates to myself. But you can also be seduced by something. If you're seduced by a pair of new shoes, maybe, yeah, because they're Jimmy Choos, you know, they're aimed to seduce women to cripple themselves. Absolutely, yes. Okay. So all sorts of connotations with seduction, but when it comes to romance and seduction, it all gets tangled up in messiness and sex, I'm afraid. Okay, the next one is mingled. Not mingled. Okay, try it, Traum. Oh, bye, Monique.
Sorry, what word should I repeat?
Mingled. To mingle.
Mingled.
Yes, if you mingle, for example, if you were to arrive at a party and you stood at the doorway and you didn't go in, somebody might come up to you and say, get in there and mingle. It means to get in amongst people, to mix up, basically. Yeah, to mix things together, to mingle. So mingled. So all mixed up. Okay.
Is this word used just for people or for things, animals also as well, or just for persons?
Well, here it's desire and seduction were mingled with fear and dread. So those four emotions were all mixed up together. Okay. You can mingle in a crowd. Yeah. You can mingle by meeting people and talking to them. That's mingling, okay? It just means to mix together. Okay? Okay, good. And then, let's see what else there was. I've got lots of Moniques here. Oh, yeah. And the last one, literary. Not literally. I'm not sure. I'll have to listen to the recording. But I think you said literally, which would mean we've mentioned literally a couple of times today. It's funny. Literally means
not figuratively.
Exactly. Yeah. But literary means to do with literature. Okay.
Yeah, I see. Literary.
Okay, maybe you did say literary. I just heard literally and I was a bit worried. And then you get a smiley for romanticism. Well done. Although we say romantic, yeah, something is romantic. He is so romantic. We talk about the general idea of being romantic as romanticism. Okay? Okay.
So, thank you.
You're welcome. Next week we're going to talk about some of the romantic connotations and the literally romantic things that we do around Valentine's Day. It'll be based a little bit on this week's vocabulary challenge. Okay. But more focused on the UK and some of the downside of this romanticism that we go through in the UK at this time of year. There is a downside to it, by the way. Drives some people crazy. All right. Any questions before we wrap up? No? You're all very quiet. No? Okay, good. I'll put the text in the forum. Okay, so if you do think of something afterwards, you can ask me in the forum. Don't forget to put @Lynn so that I get notified of the question. And if I don't notice it, do what I tell April to do. Just send me a private message or put it into my onto my page, onto my profile, because sometimes I do get these messages and they get deleted because I don't realise that they've been aimed at me. I get too many notifications at the moment, so don't worry about just saying, Lynn, you haven't answered my question. Or mark it as a question, because I get notified of those and I stay notified of them. But nobody uses it. Nobody marks things as questions. Anyhow, I hope you like our romantic setting. Feel free to explore. But as I say, if you go into the citadel, if you go into the castle at the top, the buildings aren't. Don't go trying to open doors. There's nothing actually behind the walls. It all looks very solid and real, but it does show you just how ethereal virtual worlds are. That there's nothing actually in there. It's all show. Okay, but it's a lovely build and very cleverly made. I love the river myself, so don't fall in the river. It's very fast moving. I don't want any ladies of Shalott drowning themselves in the river. Thank you very much.
Have you built yourself, Lynn?
Oh yeah, with my own fair. No, of course I haven't built it, April. Somewhere, if you actually, I'll set you a quest. Because in the age of chivalry and medieval times, people were given quests. Now, somewhere in this build, there's a box with the name of the person who built it. Okay? So if you find the box and the name of the person who built it, send me a private message in the forum and I'll think of some kind of prize. Okay? But there is a box. In fact, there is more than one box. Okay? And you can let me know who did it. That's your quest. This is my quest to find the box, no matter how hopeless, or if I get lost. Okay, I'll stop singing now, sorry. Anyhow, I'll be in TGIF on Webinar Jam in a bit. Let's fingers crossed that it works. We had a catastrophe this morning in Spotlight. It was just... Luckily, we got everything done before the catastrophe occurred, but 10 minutes towards the end, I spent 10 minutes talking to myself, basically, which is par for the course. See, you take care. Have a lovely weekend as well if I don't speak to you again. So, Zaimos, thank you so much for coming, and well done for getting your mic working. And I hope the streaming helped you to... listen to us. Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Bye, Traum. Yes, that's for target practice, for archery. Archery? Okay.
Archery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Archery
But
is using... We will be doing some archery. It's so strange. You always seem to be able to read my mind, April. You and Shiny. You notice the thing that I'm saving for a couple of weeks, but archery practice, bows and arrows basically, Robin Hood and all that. Yeah, not just arrow, you need a bow as well. So bow, what we call bows and arrows. Yeah, we always say bows and arrows.
When I saw the tents, it reminds me of a documentary I watched last week. It is about the celebration of 2,500 years of Iran. Yeah. And in that time was Shah Iran was the empire. Is it empire? You can call it empire. And he built tents for guests. But a little bit more lax than yours. The tent on the.
He's got more money than me. Okay? That's not a fair comparison. Okay.
So this picture reminds me of that celebration. The most expensive party until now.
Okay, well, I'm not surprised, but yes, we're just doing it. This would be how if you were having some kind of now. What era do you think we're in? Looking at the tents around you, looking at the way I'm dressed, looking at the castle. Do you know what era you might say we're in? To take my word for it. And in literature, they talk about the medieval epic, medieval romance, the medieval epic. And the French were actually responsible. Okay, the French really tried to make La Mort d'Arthur, the death of Arthur, and they really did romanticize it. Okay, and a lot of it was all about magic and daring do, fairies. Shakespeare covered it. Excellent, good side. It's another reason we stream. If you have voice problems, you will be able to hear us much more clearly. Okay. So I thought we could just read a little bit about the folklore and courtly love. Okay, just take a little bit of reading each. Okay.
But I'm now watching The Last Kingdom, Lynn.
Oh yes.
And it is also I thought it is in a medieval period, but it is not at
romantic.
All romantic.
No.
It is terrible. Oh,
it's so violent. Wait till you get to Vikings. Yes, I mean they would not have made. It's interesting because they would have never made The Last Kingdom a few years ago, a decade ago even. But somehow people have got sick of this rose-tinted glass and history. And I think Game of Thrones has a lot to do with it. No, honestly.
I was about to write the same thing, it reminds me Game of Thrones.
Yeah. But I think that, is share with you the stream. And quite often what you can do is mute your mic in the in-world, leave your avatar here, but use the stream maybe on your computer or maybe on another device to actually listen to what we're saying, because the stream is always clearer, the sound quality for some reason. Don't ask me why. I don't understand. I guess because Google's got really big servers. Let me give you the stream. I'll give you the stream link. Hang on.
You guys hear right now?
Yeah, really difficult to tell what you're saying. So what you can do, let me share the stream with you. Hang on a second. So this is the stream. Okay, you'll be able to listen. Gosh. You'll be able to listen to the stream, but unfortunately you might have to use text chat because we can't hear what you're trying to say. I know it's frustrating, I'm sorry, but at least you can practice your communication and your listening skills, okay? So let me know if you can hear the stream clearly. There's a little delay, of course, because we're streaming live. But you'll be able to respond to any questions, etc. Okay, so the Age of Chivalry, and it's a whole genre of romance and what they call chivalric romance. Now, to me, it's slightly ridiculous because really, I mean, they used to cut each other up. There was torture, there was murder, there was wars, but somehow we have this idea that it was romantic. Okay, you'll just have
The Middle Ages?
Yeah, Middle Ages, or Middle Ages doesn't sound very romantic. So there's a word that is more romantic. Think about Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot. Sometimes it's called medieval, okay, and sometimes it's called the Age of Chivalry. Okay, now, do you know what chivalry means? What does chivalry indicate? Any ideas? We've still got a really distorted voice, Zai. Is there something you can do to change your settings, maybe? I'm not sure. Can you hear us clearly?
Not very clear.
Okay, so if you speak quite slowly, I know it's annoying, but I just heard that quite well, not very clearly. So, April, you just wrote knights, yes. In days of old when knights were bold. Okay, so chivalry was to do with the code that knights were meant to follow, yeah? The code of chivalry. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, Zai. We do have a guide to improving sound quality on the forum. It might be worth just checking your settings. If it's really difficult for you to hear me, what I can do... So, anyway, welcome to the new sim. This is where we'll be meeting on our Friday session for the next couple of weeks. Can anybody guess why? Why would I decide to res this and invite you all here for the next couple of weeks? Any ideas? I've put a couple of clues out. Yes, well done. Now it's not Valentine, it's Valentine.
No clue.
That's Shiny's got it. Valentine's Day. It's February, and if you notice next
It has to do with castles?
No. Romance.
So?
Romance. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about, I don't know, maybe something more historic, some way.
Well,
but anyway, yeah.
We romanticize history. Okay, so we've got a nice verb here, to romanticize. To romanticize. And I can't spell. Yeah, it's with a C.
What is that? How do you say that? A round circle with some symbol. What is that, Lynn? It looks like something Germany.
Hey.
I will
behind
go there.
the roses. No, they're targets.
Yeah, behind roses.
In days of old, when knights were bold, they used to use target practice. If you notice, there's tents here. So we're surrounded by tents, and then there's the castle on the hill. You're welcome to go and explore later, but honestly, it's more look at it. It's pretty than actually being able to go anywhere. You can wander around and go in, but you won't find any rooms with furniture. It's all mesh, so it's really there as eye candy. But